Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world with me, Deepika, coming up in the next 30 minutes. US Defense Chief Hegseth holds briefing at Pentagon, cites CIA report saying Iran's nuclear sites severely damaged in recent US strikes. Axiom 4 mission's Dragon capsule carrying Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla and 3 crewmates successfully docks with International Space Station. India's Defence Minister says SCO must unite in eliminating menace of terrorism. Rajnath also highlights India's steadfast support for peace and stability in Afghanistan. And European Union leaders gather for a roundtable at an European Union summit in Brussels. Well, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth held a major news conference on Thursday to quell doubts over the damage done by US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Hegseth cited various reports saying Iran's nuclear sites severely damaged in recent US strike.
CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by recent targeted strikes. Several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. CIA continues to collect additional reliably sourced information to keep appropriate decision makers fully informed.
On the other hand, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on Thursday warned of any future aggression against Iran would come at a great cost. Khamenei also said that Iran's ability to potentially reach major US military bases is a considerable achievement. He added that such actions could be repeated if aggression is renewed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday that he will continue working with US President Donald Trump to defeat our common enemies, free our hostages, and rapidly expand the circle of peace, quote unquote. Now, Netanyahu shared the message alongside a photo of himself holding hands with Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities have intensified an internal security crackdown across the country with mass arrests, executions and military deployments, particularly in the restive Kurdish region. IRGC arrested 26 people, accusing them of collaborating with Israel days after a ceasefire between the two countries was announced. The arrest came after Israel's military chief said Wednesday that its commandos had operated secretly inside Iran during the country's 12-day war, as its spy chief also hailed assistance from US intelligence. Security forces set up checkpoints and began arresting suspected spies, with Revolutionary Guard and Basij forces placed on high alert. Iran also said that it executed 3 men accused of spying for Israel. Both the countries have claimed victory in the conflict since a ceasefire went into effect on Tuesday. However, amid all these, the world is hoping for the things to calm down in West Asia as United States would hold nuclear talks with Iran next week. US President Donald Trump even teased the possibility of a deal. Now, speaking in The Hague, where he attended a NATO summit on Wednesday, Donald Trump said he did not see Iran again engaging in nuclear weapons development. He said US would likely seek a commitment from Iran to end its nuclear ambitions at talks and credited the US strikes on Iran with bringing a swift end to the conflict between Israel and Tehran. Tehran has for decades denied accusations by Western leaders that it is seeking nuclear arms. Trump said he was confident Tehran would pursue a diplomatic path towards reconciliation, though he gave no details on the discussions next week, such as the venue and the participants.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not.
Moving on. The docking procedure of Axiom-4 SpaceX module with the International Space Station was successfully completed. Indian astronaut group captain Shubhanshu Shukla and 3 other astronauts are on board on this historic mission. The AX-4 crew successfully lifted off on the 25th of June into space on board SpaceX Dragon aircraft nearly a month of delays and postponements. Along with India's Shubhanshu Shukla, aboard the spacecraft are mission specialists Wolots Wisniewski of Poland and Tibor Kapu of Hungary and Commander Peggy Whitson of the United States. The crew will spend about 14 days aboard the orbiting lab, completing at least 60 science investigations and STEM outreach events. Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla's family also watched the docking process as their son becomes the first Indian on the space station. Shukla's parents got emotional as they watched the live telecast from UP's Lucknow. Shukla has become the first Indian now to reach International Space Station and second in space after Rakesh Sharma.
बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है। अब ये अंदर चले गए, अब कोई दिक्कत नहीं। वापसी का इंतजार रहेगा कि जल्दी से आए, जल्दी से मिले आके हम लोगों से, उसी का इंतजार।
खुशी है बहुत, अपने को जो है बहुत अच्छा महसूस कर रहे हैं। बच्चे ने सफल उसके जो है डॉकिंग हुई है, इसके लिए हम जो है ईश्वर को बहुत बहुत जो है धन्यवाद करते हैं। बहुत
इंडिया के लिए बहुत प्राउड मोमेंट है। हम डेस्परेटली वेट कर रहे थे कि डॉकिंग हो, सेफली वो पहुंचे और उसकी डॉकिंग हो, एंड वो हमने भी देखा, एंड आई एम सो हैप्पी कि वो डॉकिंग भी सेफली हो गई है।
Indian Minister Jitendra Singh also watched the docking procedure live. Minister lauded India's space journey and congratulated the astronauts on successful docking.
Congratulations. The first stage has been successfully accomplished, docking accomplished, and in fact they have made it before time. We started our space journey much later compared to the United States or even the Soviet Union. In fact, when we started, by that time the United States of America had already landed a human being on the surface of Earth, the surface of Moon in 1969. But today our credibility, the trustworthiness of our capacities has risen to such an extent that it is our talent which is being looked forward to for a collaboration which would benefit others as well. So I think that's a huge change from what it was till a few years back and it is today.
Moving on. In a first, US President Donald Trump called for Israel to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or cancel his trial on corruption charges. Trump extolled Netanyahu in his social media post. That appeared to be a reference to US involvement and support for Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear program. Now, it was unclear if Donald Trump meant the US could do anything to aid Netanyahu in his legal battle. Israeli media have reported that cross-examination of Netanyahu began on the 3rd of June in a Tel Aviv court and was expected to take about a year to complete. Netanyahu was indicted in 2019 in Israel on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust, all of which Netanyahu denies. The trial began in 2020 and involves 3 criminal cases. He has pleaded not guilty. Now, European Union leaders gathered in a summit in Brussels on Thursday to discuss defense priorities and US tariffs, among other topics. The discussion took place a day after a NATO summit in The Hague, where alliance members committed to boosting defense spending to 5% of GDP. European Union leaders are also to tell the European Commission if they want a quick trade deal with the United States at the cost of Washington getting better terms, or to escalate the fight in hope of something better. The Commission that negotiates trade agreements on behalf of the European Union will ask the leaders of the European Union's 27 members meeting in Brussels how they want to respond to President Donald Trump's 9th of July deadline for a deal, which is now less than 2 weeks away. The new members of the U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s panel of vaccine advisors will review long-approved immunization schedules for children and teens. The panel held its first meeting on Wednesday, pledging to revisit the childhood vaccine schedule and promoting themes long embraced by anti-vaccine activists. The panel's first major test comes on Thursday when it votes on whether to recommend a newly approved antibody shot against respiratory syncytial virus for infants whose mothers did not receive an RSV vaccine during pregnancy. Now, in a latest on Mexico shooting, at least 12 persons, including a teenager, were killed in Mexico during the early hours of Thursday after a gunman opened fire at a religious celebration in the Mexican state. A probe is underway to identify the shooter and the motive behind the attack. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned the shooting as deplorable. A judge in an Australian mushroom murder trial continued his instructions to the jury on Thursday as the case nears its conclusion. Justice Christopher Beale, presiding over the trial at Latrobe Valley Magistrates Court, entered his third day of guiding the jury through the legal considerations in the case. The trial is being held in Morville. Erin Peterson is charged with the murders of her mother-in-law, father-in-law and mother-in-law's sister, Heather Wilkinson. She also faces one count of attempted murder in connection with Heather's husband, Ian Wilkinson, who survived. The alleged poisonings occurred in July 2023 after a family lunch. Prosecutors allege that toxic mushrooms were deliberately used in the meal. Moving on, Colombian President Gustavo Petro signed a labor reform on Wednesday after its approval by the Colombian Senate earlier this month. The bill includes measures to enshrine an 8-hour daytime workday, increase weekend and holiday pay, and require social security payments from delivery app drivers. The approved reform will instantly raise wages for work done from 7 p.m. onwards and will gradually boost the extra pay for Sunday and holiday shifts through July 2027. Petro said the Ministry of Labour must create a task force to ensure employers are applying the reform. He also encouraged Colombians to vote for officials who will give continuity to the law in the 2026 legislative and presidential elections. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the globe in brief. South Korea's Nuclear Safety and Security Commission on Thursday approved the first dismantlement of a nuclear power plant in the country. The plant, Kori 1, was permanently shut down in 2017 after 39 years of operation. British company Gravity Industries showcased their jet suits during a demonstration at the Defence and Security Industry Day at Marina Bay Cruise Centre in Singapore. The jet suits that run on fuel, diesel or biofuel allow vertical lifting and are fitted with 5 gas turbine jet engines that can operate at speeds in excess of 80 meters per hour. England's Glastonbury Music Festival started its second day with Tai Chi, yoga and mediation on Thursday. The 5-day festival saw people in the healing field, an area built as Glastonbury's mystical and creative gardens, taking a part in a variety of eclectic sessions. Time to take a quick and short break, but still to come on the other side. Up next, we'll get you the latest information that we're tracking for you on Operation Sindhu and India's evacuation from Iran and Israel. India strongly rejects Pakistan's nefarious agenda at the UNSC. And Jofra Archer in line for a first test appearance in more than 4 years.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back after that short break. You're watching DD India Live. Well, the European Commission has adopted the Clean Industrial Deal in a bid to turn decarbonization into a business opportunity for the industry. The framework that backs both renewables and low-carbon fuels will authorize 8 schemes introduced by the members to boost clean industry, enabling the swift rollout of individual aid. Joining us with more is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimboelu in Berlin. Chiponda, good evening. Tell us about what exactly is changing.
Well, thanks for having me. Well, this deal is going to make it easier for European businesses to get state aid for projects that cut their carbon emissions. And industry will be able to benefit from temporary relief for power prices until the end of December 2030. The goal is to allow European businesses to make the transition to climate neutrality without having to bear too many costs and lose out to rivals in the United States and China. And of course, this deal is also about the competitiveness of the European Union as a place for doing business, of course. Now, Brussels is also hoping that this deal incentivizes businesses to stay here, also with lower energy costs, because European industry has been complaining about power prices. And finally, the clean industrial deal will also make it easier for private investors to invest in green projects.
So which businesses are set to benefit from this?
Well, companies that use a lot of electricity for producing goods that are mostly exported outside their countries are expected to benefit the most from this deal. So it is Europe's industrial powerhouse, Germany, that will benefit immensely. Now, German industry has, of course, struggled since it lost access to cheap Russian energy exports following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And the hope is that this will even the playing field with competitors abroad by allowing the German government to provide state aid for energy-intensive industry here until 2030. And during that time, companies are supposed to transition to greener energy and technologies. Now, on a political level, this EU deal is a big win for Germany's new government because lower energy prices for industry was one of the election promises that they made. And of course, industry is a major employer in the country too, so it is expected to have an impact here.
Also, Chibonda, tell us about the impact it will have on the European Union economy.
Well, the EU says it will create 500,000 new jobs in the bloc by supporting manufacturing and keeping industry here. The question, though, is whether this is a bit too late. While European businesses have been struggling in recent years, not just with higher energy costs, but also with more regulation, for instance, their peers elsewhere have been racing ahead in terms of innovation. Now, auto industry suppliers, for instance, say that the deal doesn't do enough to help regions that have been dealing with industrial transformation. They say that more could be done to support reskilling and investment needs in those regions that rely heavily on one industry. So it's not just about providing support for cheaper energy and the green transition. The EU will need to do more to catch up with the United States, and so it may very well have to up its game to support industry and businesses here.
Thank you so much, Ipona, for joining us from Berlin and bringing us up to speed with the latest that is happening there. Moving on. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh today took a veiled dig at Pakistan for using cross-border terrorism as an instrument of policy. Attending the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defence Ministers meet in China, Rajnath Singh reiterated India's stand on zero tolerance against terrorism, saying that any act of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable, regardless of their motivation, whenever, wherever, and by whomsoever committed.
India's zero tolerance for terrorism is manifest today through its actions. This includes our right to defend ourselves against terrorism. And we have shown that epicenters of terrorism are no longer safe, and we will not hesitate to target them.
Without naming Pakistan, the Defence Minister stressed that SCO countries must unite in condemning states which use cross-border terrorism as an instrument of policy.
It is imperative that those who sponsor, nurture and utilize terrorism for their narrow and selfish ends must bear the consequences. Some countries use cross-border terrorism as an instrument of policy and provide shelter to terrorists. There should be no place for such double standards. SCO should not hesitate to criticize such nations.
He also spoke about the dastardly and heinous Pahalgam terrorist attack which killed 26 civilians on the 22nd of April, terming Operation Sindoor carried out thereafter as India's right to defend.
The pattern of the Pahalgam terror attack matches with LET's previous terror attacks in India. In exercising its right to defend against terrorism and preempt as well as deter further cross-border terrorist attacks, India on 7th May 2025 successfully launched Operation Sindoor to dismantle cross-border terrorist infrastructure.
While in a weekly media briefing, External Affairs Ministry said that SCO Defence Ministers meeting concluded without adopting a joint statement due to disagreements on certain issues, particularly terrorism, which India wanted to be reflected in the document.
The Defence Ministers meeting has concluded. I understand that they could not adopt a joint statement. I also understand that certain member countries could not reach consensus on certain issues, and hence the document could not be finalized. On our side, India wanted concerns on terrorism reflected in the document, which was not acceptable to one particular country, and therefore the statement was not adopted.
On the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defence Ministers meeting in Qingdao, China, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Thursday held a meeting with Belarusian Defence Minister Lieutenant General Viktor Krenin. Minister Rajnath Singh called the discussion an enriching interaction. While India has strongly rejected what it described as Pakistan's nefarious agenda at the United Nations Security Council, accusing Islamabad of attempting to deflect attention from its own human rights violations and state-sponsored cross-border terrorism. India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Pavataneni Harish, issued a sharp rebuttal during UNSC's open debate on children and armed conflict.
The Secretary General's report on CAC provides details of serious violations against children in armed conflict in Pakistan. The Secretary General has expressed concern at the rise in such grave violations reported, including attacks against schools, particularly girls' schools, against health workers, and about the incidents in the border areas with Afghanistan, where a series of killing and maiming of Afghan children was directly attributed to cross-border shelling and airstrikes by Pakistani armed forces.
While India continues to evacuate its citizens from Israel and Iran, even as the news of ceasefire came in. India has so far evacuated 3,426 Indians, 11 OCI card holders, 9 Nepalese nationals, 4 Sri Lankan nationals and 1 Iranian spouse of an Indian national from Iran. A total of 14 special flights from Mashhad, Yerevan, Ashgabat were undertaken for the purpose.
From Iran, we have so far evacuated 3,426 Indian nationals, 11 OCI card holders, 9 Nepalese nationals, and some Sri Lankan nationals as well. I'll give you the exact figure, plus 1 Iranian national who happens to be a spouse of an Indian national. In all, we mounted 14 flights to bring back Indian nationals from Iran. As far as Israel is concerned, we have so far evacuated 818 Indian nationals in 4 flights.
Moving on. As part of government's Skill India mission, skill certificates were awarded to 40 construction labourers in Delhi who have successfully completed an 80-hour skill development training program in Murvan shuttering systems. The training was conducted on site at a government residential project under CPWD or Central Public Work Department's initiative to upskill labourers directly at construction locations. Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs Manohar Lal graced the ceremony. On to sports now, to begin with cricket. Jofra Archer is in line for a first test appearance in more than 4 years after being named in England's squad for next week's match against India at Edgbaston. The 30-year-old made a thrilling start to international cricket in 2019 but has not played a test since 2021 after a series of injuries. A recurring stress fracture in his elbow has required multiple operations, while a stress fracture in his back ruled him out of an entire summer in 2022. Archer returned to white ball cricket in early 2023, but when the elbow issue returned, he missed the summer once more. Archer is the only addition to an otherwise unchanged squad from England's thrilling first Test victory at Headingley. The second Test in Birmingham begins on Wednesday. In soccer, Cristiano Ronaldo is close to agreeing a new contract with Saudi Arabian club Al Nassr. Ronaldo's deal was due to expire at the end of June, but sources indicate a 2-year extension is close to being finalized. Ronaldo posted on social media, and I quote him, "The chapter is over," unquote, following Riyadh club's final Saudi Pro League game of the season last month, leading to speculation if he was set to leave. FIFA president then raised the prospect of him joining a team involved at the Club World Cup after Al Nassr's failure to qualify for the extended tournament which is being held in the United States. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download it right now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Deepika, and from all of us here in New Delhi, thank you so much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.
Welcome to Jaipur.